It's that time of year where I look back at all the reviews that I've done and I pick out the top 10 worst ones that I reviewed. Now, just to be clear, I only review Nintendo Switch games. And I decided not to include any of those games I did for that video where I bought 5 games for 15 cents, as it didn't seem fair for the cheap price I got them for. I went back and took another look at all the games that I reviewed, and even if I said it was worth the sale verdict, I might have changed my mind in either direction. Some games need a little more time to sink in and see their flaws. And I know one on this list is going to be controversial, because I didn't like it. And I know some people do. And I was very clear on how much I didn't like it in the review. And no, I'm not talking about number 10 when I get to it. If there's a game on here that you think should have been here, maybe I didn't review it, and that's why it's not there. Just as a reminder, this is just a list of games that I didn't like, and this is really just for fun. So with that said, number 10. Mario and Luigi Brothership. This is one of the games that I reconsidered. Now, I mentioned in the review I didn't like the slow start to this game, but the middle section was much better. However, what I didn't get into was the ending of this game, which definitely did not stick the landing. The ending was dragged out and unnecessarily padded. Even in the final castle, it was a slog to get through. I put this at number 10 because it wasn't a bad game, just a disappointing one. Playing this, it feels like a Mario game with Luigi just tagging along. There were times in the overworld I actually forgot he was there. I would often only remember because I had to jump on a platform again because the computer missed the jump and they forced me off it. Or it was a very specific puzzle that required Luigi to do something. Now, don't get me wrong. I think Luigi was the best character in this game. He was funny and enjoyable. He was so different from Mario, who was just such a generic character. It made me wish that this was just a Luigi game. He had personality and it was a lot of fun to be around. I think if there wasn't a history of Mario and Luigi games, they could have just given Luigi his own adventure without having his brother and giving him companions like the Paper Mario series. Number 9. Sigy, a fart for Malusa. This is a budget title and it shows. It has repetitive level designs and it's fairly quick, but I think it had the potential to be much better. There's no reason to have fart jokes in here as it made no sense with the story that they were telling. It feels like they added it just to make it edgy and decided that would make up for the repetitive level design. At the end of every level, the character farts and the level is over. Kind of like Mario's flagpole or Sonic's spinning sign. His signature is flatulence. The story is about him finding a mermaid, or a Malusa to be exact. He decides to rip a juicy fart next to her, and she rightfully swims away. He then looks for her, assuming that she's in trouble for some reason. It's never clear. I mean, it can't possibly be that she's trying to get away from you, dude. However, I gotta give it to him, he's right. At the end of the game, she's captured by fake Hulk Hogan. He just happens to run into her again. Now, you would think with that kind of setup, the game would be filled with gross-out humor or powers that would use his flatulence to his advantage. But no, it just becomes a normal platformer, much like a dumbed-down version of Ghosts and Goblins. Number 8. Fishing Break. This is a mobile game poorly ported to the Nintendo Switch. It got rid of all the pay-to-win parts of it by disabling it, but didn't actually rebalance the game to reflect it. The gameplay was dull, repetitive, and it's one of those titles where the mobile game is actually better. The fish were colorful and I liked the cartoonish look to them. While it was repetitive to catch them, I liked it when ridiculous sea life would show up. Like when sharks would come in and start eating them. At least I think they were. I heard chomping sounds, and I assumed it was just a shark having a snack of them. Also, quite often the fish would just die and just float around on the surface of the water. I have no idea what the reason or necessity of this was. Did we really have to have dead fish littering the water in this cute fishing game? More than once, dead fish would get under my boat, and it would glitch out and wouldn't let me throw out a line. It was easy to fix, I would just need to leave the area and go back, but it was just strange. Number 7. Arcade Game Zone. There are games out there where I don't understand why they were created, and this is one of them. I think the creators wanted to replicate an arcade experience, but forgot the point of these games is to win prizes. There are no unlockables or prizes or any reasons for playing these games. It's not a terrible game, just a pointless one. The controls were very awkward in some of the games, and actually a little annoying to use. Pool was the worst example of this. You would move the stick around like a clock, but when you got to the halfway point, you would need to change the direction that you're pressing to rotate the stick. It was very frustrating. I think the computer player had the same issue with the controls, because we took forever to finish one game. There are 10 main games to play. Air hockey, table football, ball hop bowling, which was just skee ball. But I guess they didn't want to spend the money on the license for the real name. Basketball, darts, pool, bowling, rail shooter, whack-a-mole, and NASCAR race? They licensed the name NASCAR? That had to be a pretty penny. Why not a generic name like slot car racing? Number 6. Emo The Smiling Man. Now, this is the controversial pick that I knew people would have issues with. I was very clear on how much I disliked this game when I reviewed it. I think the story is meandering and dull. It barely spends any time on the initial death that they brought us in to investigate. It has the worst conversation system, and the best thing that I'm going to say about it is that the 30-minute anime at the epilogue was great. But most of the story is so stretched out, it just didn't make it fun to play. The story is told very slowly, and at times scenes go on too long. Now, I was not planning on showing any footage past chapter 4, but there was a scene that I need to talk about here. We're in a car going somewhere, but it drags on for so long. Like I mentioned, I wasn't going to record this, but it just kept going and I was losing my mind. It just has you talking to another character, and it's just one of the many examples of this game needing an editor. I think this car ride lasted about 20 minutes, and you feel the time passing. Even the later chapters have sections that just drag on for no reason. Now, for a very vague example, you talk to an old man for what has to be 15 minutes. And his dialogue was, huh? I remember what? I swear I must have hit the conversation buttons like 40 times. It was so frustrating. Number 5, Wilys Wonderland. I love the movie that this was based on. It has everything that the Five Nights at Freddy's movie should have had. And this game tries to replicate it by making it a brawler. It should have been a fighter like Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat. It just didn't make any sense as a repetitive brawler, as it took away the excitement of killing the animatronics just to have them come back. Plus, I think the controls were bad and the level designs were just dull. This game feels like the person who created it just saw some screenshots and a plot summary and based a video game around it, as it's nothing like the movie, unless I missed the part where a bunch of zombies, drones, and ninjas showed up. I'm gonna do something I tend to never do, and I'm just gonna show off the whole game. You're gonna see every level of this game, even the ending part, and that's for one reason: this part.
Come on.
You had one job. The whole thing in the movie is that Nicolas Cage's character, the janitor, never says anything except some grunts. When in the end he says, "Come on!" like he's auditioning for a new Duke Nukem game.
Come on.
How do you screw this up? All they had to do was not spend money on voice actors, and at least that part would be faithful to the movie. Number 4, Monster High: Skulltimate Secrets. This feels like a quickly made game to cash in on Monster High mania. The school itself is dull to explore, and it feels like a copy and paste job all over the place. The main quest has you finding keys that are scattered around the grounds, and they made it as difficult as possible to find them, because if they didn't, the game would be over in an hour. For example, let's look at the bathroom. And at this point, I can see my regular watchers going, is he really going to go on another 2-minute rant about the bathrooms like he did in that Barbie review? And to that I would say, you know me so well. Anyway, the bathrooms. Let's start with the biggest issue. There is no door to it. What is it with kid games and no bathroom doors? That Barbie game that I mentioned before, Barbie Dreamhouse Adventure, had the same problem. Tubs and showers that are just open to the world. At least in this game, it's just sinks and toilets. And the stalls do have doors for privacy. At least in theory. The stalls are all too small. I mean, who are these built for? Also, the doors don't close. You can see they get stuck on the toilets. And there's also too many of them. I mean, this isn't the only bathroom in the school, but at least the other bathroom actually has a door to get into it. It kind of feels like someone took an asset and just copy and pasted it too many times without actually caring about what it looks like. Number 3, Games Advent Calendar 2024. I'm sure everyone saw this one showing up. The games in this one feel like they put so little effort into them, and they know you're just buying it as a goofy Christmas themed game, and you're not going to spend a lot of time on it, so they're not going to put a lot of effort into it. The controls were often bad, and it was riddled with gameplay bugs, and I hope next year's version will be better. Now, just like last year's edition, you have to spend each day breaking into people's homes. This new town is called Winter Village, which is never referenced, but I'll get into how I figured out the name of this town a little bit later. Now, this town has to have some of the worst property values ever. In order to get around, you have to hop on a train where the tracks are right outside your house. That's gotta be so loud. And this train can't reverse, so if you want to go backwards, you're gonna have to do a whole lap around the town. It was crazy. Now, playing this, I have to say, this is one of the worst things that I've played this year. Now, usually I would just talk about the games I liked from best to worst. Honestly, I really didn't like any of them. Some of them were just okay, but most of them were a step down from the previous version. There was a Fruit Ninja type game, and it made no sense. Why is someone throwing ornaments in the air in order to slice them? And more crucially, why is someone throwing bombs? Is this the way that Santa's elves spend their free time? Frostbreaker and Arctic Climb feels like no one tested this. Frostbreaker is just Arkanoid, only done much worse. The ball is too fast and I could barely play this. Also, the name tag for your character would block the sight of your paddle as well. Arctic Climb is just Donkey Kong without the fun. The game would throw down all kinds of snowballs for you to jump over or break, but they throw down too many. It's just too easy to get overwhelmed. This is a kid's game. It shouldn't have brutal difficulty. Number 2. The Park. This 1-hour game was very dull. It had a confusing story and wasted the very detailed world that they created. It was one of the most boring walking simulators I've ever played. They had this big park for us to explore, but they rarely used it to tell a story. It's a game that wants to be spooky and scary, but ends up being more frustratingly dull. The biggest positive that I'm going to say about this is the voice acting. I actually thought it was decent. You know what wasn't decent? The controls, pathfinding, and pretty much any sense of enjoyment. Let's start with the controls. You have to walk around this broken down amusement park, and it's so tedious to do it. They let you speed up your character if you hold down the left analog stick, but that was so uncomfortable. Usually if games do this, they use it as a toggle, not a consistent press, as it's really hard on your thumbs to do that. Even worse is the pathfinding. The park is fairly large and detailed. Almost too detailed. We'll get into why in a minute, but finding your son in this dark park is a nightmare to do. Good games will give you an indication of where to go, even in subtle ways. They only start to do this about halfway through. Before that, you have to yell out for your son consistently and hope you're going the right way. It's sort of like the horror equivalent of Marco Polo. Number 1. Endless Ocean Luminous. I have really enjoyed the last 2 Endless Ocean games, and I was really excited to play this. Unfortunately, what I got was a terribly procedurally generated world, which made it boring to explore, because when you do that, you don't put any care into making the world interesting. And it has a story that's locked behind getting certain conditions or scanning fish. The scanning wasn't terrible, just repetitive. But when it forced you to find 99 objects that were randomly added to a random map that can repeat items, it loses any sense of enjoyment to it. And that's why I think it's the worst game that I reviewed this year. Just like the original game, there is no combat, and you also don't have to worry about running out of air. You also can't collect the fish, which was disappointing because I really wanted to throw one of the many dinosaurs you see into a tank and make it my own Jurassic Park. Yes, there are dinosaurs in this game. They seem content to just hang out in this very small area of the ocean. You would think this would be locked off by the government, but this organization just says it's just keeping it a secret and basically don't think about it too hard. They also took away the ability to pet fish, which was disappointing when I tried to pet the megalodon. All the aquatic life is friendly, which of course is insane. They say the luminous light that's all around them in this area causes them to be docile, and you're tasked with collecting the light from these creatures, which makes me wonder, how on earth do you collect light? Is it some kind of vacuum device? Does this world work on magic? Also, if the light around the sea life is causing them to be submissive, wouldn't taking it away break that spell? Well, that's my list of the games that I reviewed that I didn't like this year. Up next is my top 10 list of the best games that I reviewed this year, and I think there's some really interesting picks on there. I hope everyone has a Merry Christmas, and thank you for watching.